Nothing's going to work. We'll just make it happen.
Mike, can we start the recording if you haven't started?
Just started it.
Thank you, Mike. All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 6:10. Oh, wait, you're going to do the minutes, Natalie? I was like, oh, wait, I also have to do the minutes. 6:10. And then if Stephen is able to get his microphone set up, then he will take over as chair. So I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the unceded lands of the Mi'kmaq. And I have the record of attendance, and we have a couple of guests today. Aaron and Lydia are here from the Western Counties Regional Library, so they will be our presenters this evening in the public input session. So welcome to you. Thank you for coming. I believe that Peter is on his way, so he will be joining the meeting a little bit late. And Derek is not here. And otherwise, I think we should be good. But I can't see that now. Okay. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest for this evening's meeting? I'm expecting none. All right. Could I have a motion that the agenda as distributed be approved? And I see Gil's hand is up. And I see Tracy seconding. Thank you very much. And the minutes from our November 15th meeting. If I could have a motion that the minutes that were circulated be approved, or if there's any changes. And I think, oh, I see Tanya making a motion. Everybody's super tiny. And I see Gil seconding. Thank you. All right, Aaron and Lydia, I guess I will turn things over to you to share about the Western Counties Regional Library.
Aaron, you're on mute.
I did put myself on mute a second ago when I was typing. Thank you. So Lydia and I spoke briefly about our presentation this evening, and we weren't quite sure what this committee was looking for in terms of information. So the way that, and Peter, if it's the same Peter, is on the, it's called the Interregional Advisory Committee for Accessibility Plan, which is very long to say that 5 regions within the province collectively developed a plan, and Peter and I are part of that committee. So similar to your committee, but we're actually a larger committee because all regional libraries in the province had to have accessibility action plans. So I can speak a bit to the plan, and then thought that Lydia would take most of the time to talk about the services that we offer, if that's what you were looking for in terms of a public I don't know what you called it, but presentation. Does that seem?
Yes, I'm not sure. I wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Stephen contacted people. I'm not really sure if there were specific things, but anything related to accessibility would be great.
Okay, so I get the boring piece where I get to explain to you guys the library and how it fits in to the greater library system within the province, because I think it will help you understand what we're doing in Yarmouth specifically, and reasons why some things move quicker than others, and our areas of concentration align with other regions. So just to give you a bit of a background and on regional libraries and how they work in the province, is that in the province, there are 9 regional library systems. We're one of them, Western Counties Regional Library. So there are 9, and amongst those 9, there's Halifax Public Libraries. And we tend to kind of keep them separate because they operate differently than how we do. We're we're primarily funded by the province, while Halifax is funded primarily by the city. So the way that they operate is quite different because they get the support from the city, and there's a lot of stronger partnerships there because just the way the organizational structure works, they're able to work closely together in a more efficient way. So Western Counties Regional Library is part of 8 rural regional library systems. And as I mentioned, 5 of those systems got together to develop a overarching plan for accessibility for our regions, similar to what the municipalities and education institutions and all sorts of organizations developed in the last year or so. So that plan was approved in this past spring. And from that stemmed regional action plans. So we have a plan that's kind of like an overarching plan that 9 regional library systems are implementing individually on their own. So I hope you guys are following this because it gets a bit more, I'm going to narrow it down a bit further. So Western Counties Regional Library, us, me and Lydia, we manage, well, not just me and Lydia, but there's a group of us, and we manage 10 libraries within Western Counties Regional Library. So any action item within our plan, we have to actually implement in all of those 10 branches. So while Yarmouth is one branch, it actually is one branch of 10 branches. And in order to provide equitable library service, any action that we actually that we implement has to be implemented across the board. So our action plans we are starting to develop annual action plans so that we can make sure that we actually hit our targets. I said this was the boring stuff, so I just want you to bear with me for a minute. So we do have the overarching action plan is available on our website, and you all can go and check it out if you'd like at westerncounties.ca. We have an accessibility tab at the top, and there it speaks to how the library is becoming more accessible and what we're doing in that area. And that will change and be updated as time goes on. And so if you're interested in reading that, it's there. And so this year we have an action plan that we've been working on actively. One of the things that we wanted to focus on within this year's plan, knowing that it was going to take a long time, was, or longer than a lot of the other activities, was the built environment. And I'm sure you're all well aware, but the province announced recently, I think it was in September, that they would come out with a revised standards and guidelines that would only come out in 2024. Our library buildings, we don't own our library buildings, and we have to work with the building owners to be able to make changes to the buildings. And the building owners have pretty much agreed that they need to wait for that plan to come out, or guidelines to come out, before making any real changes. So where the library has flexibility is in making changes in the shelf space that they have, any changes that they can in the amount of tables and chairs that there are, so that there are people, I'm thinking more physical environment there, but just to be able to move around, that type of thing. So there are limitations there, but we are prepared to work with the building owners in 2024. So where we've decided to focus, so that we don't, basically so that we don't lose time, is to focus on the things that we can control and are able to work on now, and to be able to develop and make better. So a few areas, the main area that we've been focusing on this year is on the collection side of things. And Lydia is a good person to speak to this, because not only have we been augmenting our collections for audiobooks and ebooks, we've also been training our staff in being able to make books and in different formats available to members of the public. And part of that is to make members of the public aware of what is available to them. And Lydia knows way more about this, so I'll hand it over to her in a minute. And the other piece that we're actively working on, and we didn't realize how big this was, but in the physical environment, if you think about libraries, we store our books on shelves. And when we looked at our shelf space, so the amount of shelves that we have in each of our buildings, where we're going to change the shelves so that they become more accessible, so removing the bottom shelf, just doing that is going to result in thousands of books that we can no longer shelve in the libraries, which is not it's not a negative thing. I know it sounds like a negative thing. It's not. It's just that it's a big challenge for us because we're having to actually go through all of them and kind of like, we're kind of reshifting all of our collections. So that's going to take some time as well. So as I said, we're very much focused on the collection side of things, in part because our bread and butter is books, and in all formats. It is the biggest activity that happens in our libraries. That's not to say that we're not working on other things. And I figured that it probably would be best if you had specific questions that we could answer them in terms of what we're working on. A lot of it is in the research phase in terms of how to make our programs and services more accessible. But in the collection side is where we feel like we have the best expertise. So I'm going to switch it over to Lydia. And then if you guys have questions following our presentation, feel free to ask.
Hi, my name's Lydia Hunsberger. I'm the collections manager for Western Counties Regional Library. Yeah, so in our regular collection, which is kind of what I refer to the general collection that anyone with a library card can access. We have regular print books, but we also have other formats available for people that anyone with a library card can take out. So you may be familiar with our large print collection. We also offer audiobooks. These are available on both discs and also through our e-library, so through Overdrive and Hoopla, which are online resources where you can download audiobooks from. We also offer and purchase when they become available something called high-low books. So these are books with a higher interest level with a lower vocabulary. So these are books catered and directed at people who may not be as confident readers, but want to read content that their peers are reading. So it might be a teen who wants to read thrillers or an adult who wants to read romance novels, but they're not as confident as a reader of their peers or aren't able to read the same regular print books as their peers for whatever reason. So we do purchase those. Those are really limited by what's available through the publisher, which is sadly becoming less. But when they do come out, typically on like a quarterly or biannual basis, I do look at purchasing those. Another aspect of the collection that we do have is autism kits. So these are tools that people can take out, and they are kits full of either sensory objects, visual objects, so like timers and like, I don't know exactly what they're called, but they're like gel bubbles in a tube. Another kit is fidget toys. So it's like stress balls and hand fidget toys, air cushions, so like wobble pads for your chair. And one of the kits also has like noise canceling headphones. So tools that may have a very high upfront cost that people may not be able to invest in or may not want to invest in until they know that tool works for them or their child or whoever they're taking it out for. So we are looking at developing and allocating more funds to replacing tools in those kits as they wear out, because they do get use, and then, you know, the bubbles in the tubes break and then you have a leak in your bag. So we are looking at that. For patrons who aren't able to get into our library branches, we do offer borrow by mail service. And if people aren't confident navigating the website or aren't able to navigate the website, they can call into our staff and staff can help them select books. So we do staff assisted selection. And we recently had readers advisory session to help train staff so that they are more confident working with patrons to get them paired up with books and materials that they like. And that can be kind of on a one-off basis or on an ongoing basis, depending on what people need. So that's kind of everything that we have in our regular collection. But another part of this collection, or another part of library service, is we are a member of CELA and NELS, so the Center for Equitable Library Service and the National Network of Equitable Library Service, which are two different organizations within Nova Scotia and in Canada that provide materials in alternative formats to people with print disabilities. So that can be a vision impairment, physical dexterity impairment, or perceptual impairment, anything that really bars an individual from reading what we would call a regular print material. And it could really be like a temporary disability, a long-term disability. CELA is kind of a self-identified service. Stephen, do you have a question?
What about Braille? I haven't heard anybody talk about that.
Yeah, so we don't get a ton of requests for Braille, and we don't keep it in our collection just because it takes up a lot of space.
Okay.
However, if somebody does read Braille, they can get contracted or uncontracted Braille books through CELA or NEL's service. Yeah.
Okay, I did not know.
Erin?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention as well, we contacted, I forget the organization because it was through our department at the government level, but we had contacted some, I guess, experts in this area when we were looking at developing our new library cards. And what they said was that now with all of the new technology available, there are a lot of people who are not even learning to read Braille. And
Yep.
it's not a format that's being supported. So even the types of books that would be available, I think at one point we had the Bible in Braille.
I think
and
we
then
still do.
I was going to say, and then we had a mold issue in the basement years ago. And I know some of the books were affected by it, but Braille doesn't seem to be the format that is being supported even by people with visual impairments, because of you can get downloadable audios now. There are all sorts of, I think you mentioned it, Lydia, talking books, different formats that way, which is sort of interesting if you think about it. So
Yeah, and with some of the e-library services that you might be familiar with, like Overdrive and Hoopla, they can be used by anyone, but they don't have specific accessibility. They're working on becoming more accessible, but they're not designed specifically for people with print disabilities. They're designed for, the general public, unfortunately, which doesn't always take into account different abilities. So CELA and NELS can be a good alternative for people who do need a little bit of a different service. So one of the things that we purchased within the last year are, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with the Humanware Victor readers. They read the DAISY format. So we have purchased Victor readers for all 10 of our branches. And so the DAISY format, it stands for, I have it here. It is the Digital Accessible Information System. So basically it's a standard that publishers use to publish these talking books. So they have a greater suite of accessibility features. They can store more information. So like a DAISY file can include audio, but it can also include textual content and images. It can also include like closed captions for images. If people have a contracted Braille display, DAISY files can sometimes link to that Braille display and be read in Braille. So it's a very versatile file format. And the Victor Reader is a talking book player that plays this specialized DAISY format. It looks like a CD, or it can look like a CD, but it won't play on a regular CD player. And these Victor readers, I should have brought one with me, but they kind of have a display like a Walkman, so you can play fast forward, but it also has more features where you can bookmark, you can set sleep timers, you can, if you're reading longer things, you can set a good number of bookmarks. If you have your own Victor reader, you can link it to your internet so that you can get your books direct to your player through your CELA account. And people with print disabilities can sign up for CELA for free through the library and get linked to their CELA account, and then, you know, use it on their DAISY reader, their Victor reader if they own one, or even through apps on smartphones and iPads, such as Dolphin Easy Reader is another one. So there's a lot of different ways to access these files, and we are working on making sure our staff are more trained and more comfortable, because we do know that there's probably a lot more people out there who would benefit from these services than are currently using them. And our staff don't always get a ton of people in every day asking about these things. We do have some regular patrons who they do help, you know, navigate CELA, navigate NELS. So that's an area that we're focusing on training a little bit more. That's kind of, I could talk about DAISY a lot longer because it's
Well,
so big.
the other thing too is that if you're anything like me is, and I've heard this, Lydia's been with us for a few years and we've been talking about all of this for a while, but I don't deal directly with these materials. And I can't imagine what some of you are thinking if you're not familiar with these terms and what they all mean. And that's okay. We do have a section, if you are interested and are able to, there are sections on our website regarding accessible services, which may help you understand what these are. But I guess at the end of the day is that our staff are actively being trained to be able to identify people's needs so that they can help them to access books where they can, dependent on their needs. And otherwise, the average person isn't going to necessarily know how to match their own needs to a service that the library subscribes to. So it was just to kind of give an overview of there are a variety of streams that people can go through if they, depending on where they're at in their lives and what they want. And hopefully we'd be able to help them with that. A few other things that I just wanted to mention quite quickly, because we tend to focus a lot on people with visual impairments, there were a few things that were done during COVID, where I took the opportunity to get some grants. It was basically to make our spaces safer, but knowing that with the accessibility guidelines and standards hadn't been solidified, we do acknowledge that any changes that we do make to our built environment or to our furniture has to take into account accessibility. So in the last 2 years, we have actually replaced a lot of our computer stations so that people with mobility issues or people that are in chairs or whatnot can actually get seated at the computer stations, because in Yarmouth, they were so small. I think they were built for children, really. So there wasn't really any ability to move around. So we've done that. We've been able to upgrade a bit of the furniture. We do bits by bit when we get grants. And also we have introduced, each of our libraries, including Yarmouth, has an accessible computer access station. And that is with the having to do with motor skills as well as visual and hearing, just to try to help people to be able to use that station. And I can't speak to it in great detail because the software that's in it, I'm not as familiar with it, but it is a standard that the libraries have been using across the province. And we did receive funding for that, for the initial funding, and then we're incorporating that within our annual funding for replacements. We could say a lot more, but I'm sure that, it is the evening and everybody has things to do. But does anybody have any questions? Just anything that you're thinking or?
I do have a quick one.
Yeah.
I actually work with kids who have visual impairments, so I'm all about the Victor Reader and all that kind of stuff. I'm curious for adults. Well, it doesn't really matter. What is the loan period for the Victor Reader? Is it the
The
same?
Victor Readers are 3-week loans,
Okay.
similar to our materials, but they can be renewed.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. This was very helpful information.
I will say, thank you. I don't know if anybody can hear me now. I had issues later, but I will say to both of you, thank you for coming out. And thank you for the information you shared. One of the things that I think surprised me was the fact that you have sensory kits. I never would have assumed going to the library for a sensory kit. I'm sure Tracy can tell you, we put together a few dozen of them over the course of the years. So I gotta be honest, I'm gonna come down and check a few out and see what they're like and see if I can compare notes. So thank you. Has anybody else got any questions, thoughts, ideas?
I do want to say thank you for inviting us. This is the first time that we've been invited to speak to a group. And one of the things, and we haven't gotten there yet. We are looking at, I wanted to get a lot of our managers are new, relatively new to the job at the library, but I wanted them to really understand where we're going with this plan. And then the idea is that we're going to have a mechanism in place for people to provide feedback or suggestions, but we wanted to wait until we were ready to be able to respond to those suggestions or feedback. But having said that, you are an established group, and if you're familiar with the Yarmouth branch and have any feedback or suggestions, feel free to reach out to Lydia or I, or if you have questions. Some things are beyond our control in that we do not own certain parts of the building or the parking lot, but doesn't mean that we can't work towards making those changes. And so that's something that I'm sure I learn every time that I know that I'm with my group, and I'm sure that if there is something that comes to mind, then feel free just to reach out to us and kind of.
Well, I won't tell you what made me reach out to Lydia was the fact that I saw her in the Salt Wire or Vanguard or something. And it's been the same thing with us. People don't ask because they don't know that it exists. And I would encourage you, just as the same as I do our committee, to get your message out there about what you do offer. A library is not just a place with computer books and newspapers. It's a whole lot more, as we've just seen tonight. So I would encourage you to keep up the whole communication thing, training, education. Let people know what you got. I believe in the field of dreams. They said, if you build it, they will come. Well, it sounds to me like you built it. You're just going to tell people about it. Anybody else? Okay, is Natalie still here? I feel like I'm jumping in.
No, I'm still here. Mr. Chair, I can share the agenda again and we can continue the meeting.
Yeah, the agenda was what I was looking for. If we're all done with the questions, comments, even a comment, like I said before, thank you so much for taking the time of your evening to join us. It really was informative. I really enjoyed that.
Okay. Well, I think
you are welcome to put your mics and your cameras on mute and observe the rest of the meeting if you wish. You can't vote in it, but if you wish to observe, the meetings are open to the public.
let's see what's on the agenda. I was just thinking if it would help me out with my work.
I think the next part of the agenda is me. Is that right?
I might,
I don't have it in front of me.
If it's okay, I might stay on. I'm kind of curious to know what your working draft for accessible customer service policy is. If that's okay.
Yep. That's
Okay.
fine.
I will mute and turn my camera off.
Um, Sherry, bring me up to speed. What's going on here?
Oh, it's back over to you. Sorry, I thought that was
Okay.
understood. Yes, I chaired the first part. Welcome back and go.
I
ahead.
have a PowerPoint presentation as far as the chair's report goes, but I don't have the agenda in front of me to say where we're at.
The agenda is on the screen. Natalie shared it. Oh, and now it's gone. But we are at number 9, a chair update.
Share 9A update. Okay, well, I'm going to see if I can share this file. All right, can we see that?
No.
No? Try one more time. How about now? No.
Sorry. Nope.
Oh, it does not surprise me. We see it now?
Sorry. You sounded so hopeful, but we still can't see it.
Okay. I'll read it to you then.
Go for it.
Okay. Now I'm not going to fight with us anymore. Wow.
Are you okay to go ahead, Stephen?
Well, I've got you here, but I don't. So I'll be right
Okay.
back.
So should we skip ahead to the next one, to Natalie's, and then go back when Stephen can rejoin us? And everybody just went blurry for me too.
Mm.
Oh boy. Natalie, is that an okay plan?
Yeah, that sounds good. And I'm not quite sure. Can you see me now? Yes, we're
Yes.
all having, yeah. So I think for the
Yeah.
purposes of just time. So I'm not going to pop the working draft of the accessible customer service policy on the screen. I've distributed that to everybody on the team. Has everybody received the email with that attachment? If you haven't, send me an email and happy to resend it again. And for those, I think, Peter, if your preference is to have a printed copy, let me know. We'll print it and you can pick it up or we can drop it off to you. So that accessible customer service policy was put together in its working draft form with information gathered from the city of Niagara Falls and Huntsville, the community of Huntsville in Ontario, who are far advanced with their accessibility policies as it relates to the standards set by the Ontario Disabilities Act. And so what you see there reflects that. As a little preamble, I did reach out to the Accessibility Directorate Coordinator to ask, if we could be forward in putting together that policy, as the Goods and Services Standing Committee is now being formed at the provincial level. So they still have that work to do. And so I went through with them what the process would be and the information gathering to develop the working draft and the engagement that we would be carrying out, which is with this group as well as with staff. And so the feedback was that's what the standing committee's work will be doing. So we're just advanced by a year or two, and that happy that we're doing this level of engagement. So what you see is a working draft. I'm asking if you guys can read it, look at it from your lens of if you have a disability from that lens. But if you're working with people who have disabilities, please challenge what is in there. Also, I did my best to look at sites related to vision impairment and other areas, but I'm not an expert. So again, some of you are more experienced in working with those different types of sites. Please take a look at it and make sure that I'm referencing the right material. Staff has just received that working draft last week. I've already gotten some initial feedback. I'm looking to get everybody's input within the month of January, and then I'll bring back a draft with comments, not with a final looking draft, but with comments, because it has to be a living document for a while, not a rushed kind of scenario. Happy to say that the work that the Ontario group has done, they've also put together some training material. And so, sometimes we're good at developing policies, but that training part, it's so nice if there's audio and video already put together that can accompany it as a soft introduction to, what is the work before us with regards to making people aware of how to be more accessible when we're working with the public. So I've passed that on to our HR. And so we're going to be looking at that. So again, once we've done that, that will come back to this group so that you can lay your eyes on it and say, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I can see as a beginning, we can do that. And that's something else I addressed with the Accessibility Directorate Coordinator, that this is a living document. And when they come out with their policies or standards, I should say, then obviously this group staff will look at what that is, compare it, and then we can move forward with that. So that's kind of my update on that, and willing to take any questions right now if anybody's had a preliminary review of it and has any questions. And Erin, happy to send you a copy of that working draft if that would be helpful to you.
It says everybody well, first of all, I apologize I guess if you can't hear me, I apologize for the tech issues I've had tonight. It's been insane. Never update your computer before a meeting. Never. Ever, ever. Don't do it. Did everybody get a copy of the report that Natalie? I encourage you to take time to read it. I just briefly read it, probably a week ago, and I'm gonna go through it again. It's a good step in the right direction. Anyway, is any more questions, comments, or concerns? I'm gonna give my report. I tried to put it on PowerPoint and be all presentative, but apparently that's not gonna go through. So I'm gonna talk about just basically a few things, as we've already talked, as I talked about back back in our first meeting. I think was back whenever, the end of the first of this year or whatever. We talked about in December. Was it December or January? No, because we didn't meet. Our last meeting, we talked about where we were going from now, and one of the things that I wanted to look at, and we saw tonight, was looking at goods and services that are available in the Tri-County areas for persons with accessibility issues. We heard some great material from the library tonight. Some things I totally was not expecting. Another group that I'm going to go and put some pressure on is the new Easter Seals office that's in town. You'll see on the agenda that we would like to send a letter welcoming them to the committee. I will also go as far to say to do some advertising for them, that they also have been doing, I'm going to try and pull up the details accurately here. They have been teaching people to sled, teaching people how to play wheelchair basketball, and something called Boca, whatever, for precision ball sport. I don't pretend to know what that is, but it sounds like fun. And most importantly, it's getting people with accessibility issues involved in organized sports. You can find them on Facebook. Check them out if you know anyone that might be interested. Also, the Nova Scotia roadmap, or accessibility roadmap, has been released. Has anybody gotten a copy of that and had a chance to read it? No. Okay, Sherry, I'm going to send you a link to that. Could you send it out to everybody? There's no way that I could possibly do it justice tonight, but it is a very good read. It's 48 pages long. It's a great plan looking at where the Nova Scotia government is going with regards to accessibility issues. It's a plan to see more people with accessibility issues hired by the government. It's a plan to look at infrastructure, services, whether or not they are or are not meeting the needs of persons with accessibilities. One of the things that I got reading through it is, we've all talked about it over the course of the time as we look at buildings. Building structure, building code is going to change over the next few years. I'm not going to put a time frame on it. But one of the impressions I got is it is going to change. It's going to change with the idea of including any and all accessibility issues that we can possibly mandate, such as color for persons in texture and sensor, such as sound, such as whatever the need may be. That's going to change. Also, one of the things that I got looking at it was, one statement that kept coming out is the use of language. And one statement that was said is, nothing without us, without us. And I had to reread that a couple of times, and it made, to make it make sense. And I'm thinking, we get together, every major business gets together and has training. We have workman's compensation groups, we have first aid, we have all kinds of training, and it's not just any one organization. We all have them. Schools, libraries, town halls, whatever. We all have various safety committees, various training for first aid, food handlers, whatever the course may be. Wouldn't it be interesting if businesses actually sat down and had an accessibility persons meeting and talked with their crew about whether or not they are meeting the accessibilities that an employee may face in the employed environment? When I look at the laws, and I guess when I first started 18 months ago, I always understood the law to be that an employer had to make adaptations if it was convenient for them. And I had to stop recently and change my wording, change my understanding or my thinking. It's not the way it is anymore. Today, an employer has to make accessibility changes, period. It's not the right. It's moving more and more towards the right of the person with the accessibility. And I found that, now I'm just going to say that I found that interesting because one of the other things I'm going to bring up tonight is Derek reached out to me. You know, Derek is not here. He's not here for a very good reason, and I won't go into that. But one of the aspects that Derek brought out to me was he was looking at the hospital, and as we all know, the hospital services are majorly overworked right now. And I will tell you, as a person that just got out of the hospital here, hasn't been a month yet. I spent my time in what they call an overflow emergency room. Never did see a hospital room. But I spent 9 days in a 6x6 curtained off area with 6 other people in the room. I don't believe that we necessarily have the power or the right or the ability to issue money to the healthcare system and say, here, go fix this. We don't. But we do, as an accessibility committee, have the right to put this back on the government's desk and say, hey, you need to stop turning a blind eye to the healthcare system. And I will say, to this point, the healthcare system is underly funded, underly bedded, underly staffed. And I think as a group, we should continue to put pressure to say, hey, you need to do something. Now is the time you need to do something. One of the things that both Derek and I looked at is the fact that in these overflow systems, there were no lift systems. So nurses are required to lift the patients. If you know anything about lifting patients in and out of bed, that's not a good idea. Some of those patients are oversized. Some of those patients are frail. Some of those patients don't like it, regardless of how you try to move them, you're going to hurt them without the proper lift support systems. And none of these overflow beds have lift systems in them. None of them. And there has to be at least 2 dozen. I don't necessarily have an answer for the question, but I'm going to ask the question, what can we do to continue to support or help the government acknowledge that there's need as a committee? And if you've got some comments, some thoughts, some ideas, I'd love to hear them. If you don't, that's okay too. It's really a rhetorical question that I expect you to think about. And I'll leave it at that. As I mentioned, Sherry's going to send that report out, and I would strongly encourage you to read it. it's really, really informative, and it's really interesting to see. You'll see 8 priorities that the government has identified and where we're going with them by 2025, where they hope to have their plan established as to how it's going to happen.
Okay, as Natalie mentioned in the chat, there's actually a link in the agenda that was emailed out to that plan. So it's right there. That is a link right in there. So you can access
Okay, I don't have my chat open. I will. Yep. Thank you.
That's good. That's why I said it. No problem.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, that's all I've got for the chair's report. Can we pull the agenda back up? Yep, the link is there. I would encourage anyone to oh, you totally lost my thought. The 2022-25 Government of Nova Scotia Accessibility Plan. Like I said, it's about 48, 49 pages. I encourage you to go and take a look at that. Now we're moving on to status of citizen appointment application. I received an email that we have 1 application to this position. What happens in that case, Natalie?
Well, the nominating subcommittee can review that application and they can make a recommendation to accept it and to appoint that member, or we can do additional advertising. Mike Carter, our communications officer, is actually doing a article, our article. Mike, do you want to maybe quickly comment on that?
Yes, so coincidentally, you can hear me okay?
Yep.
Good. So coincidentally, I have to advertise for at least 1 other committee within the next week's Vanguard, I believe it will be. And also there will be some social media and website and alertable notifications and all the fun things that go with them. So I could adapt my advertising to do another round for accessibility committee if you chose to. It's easily done. So if the group wants to, make another stab at it to see if they get any more applications, I can very easily do that, but that's up to you guys.
Tanya's got a question.
It's not a question. I just wanted to say to that I did bring forth the information to the college at a faculty and staff meeting before the break, and just kind of gave them a little bit of insight as to the committee and what we're doing and what we do, and opened it up for staff to bring that information back to their students so that faculty could in programs like mental health and recovery and social services, early childhood, any of the programming at the college, so that if there was a student in any of their classes that might be interested. So I did kind of pass it on through there, and it was sent out via email as well. I thought that it was a great platform to put that into. So I did pass it on.
Gail?
Yeah, I guess if we have 1 applicant and we only have 1 vacancy, wouldn't it be prudent, I guess, to assess that applicant and see if the applicant is in fact qualified or is somebody that we'd like to have in the committee before we go through the process of re-advertising?
Yeah, I agree with Gail. I do know the applicant in question, and I would say subject to an interview by our nominating committee. I would say that if the interview goes fine and they're convinced, I would say let this individual join. I've got no problem between now and then if Mike wants to put out another invitation. But I would say that this individual has applied. I know they have a disability. I do know this individual. I know they have a mobility disability, as I already emailed back. And I would have no problem with them joining the committee. But that's not to say that Mike, if he re-advertises, might pull somebody else in. But I'm also thinking we've already tried this 2 or 3 times now. No offense, Mike, but I'm not optimistic.
And if I
Yeah.
may, I just think, I hate to advertise or invite people to apply to a committee, just so we can say no to them.
Yep. I agree.
I would prefer it if we could perhaps do the interview, go through the interview process, whatever's required, and determine if this applicant is, I have no idea who it is, but I'd like to at least judge that applicant and make a recommendation based on that before we advertise for more applicants. That would be my preference.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Perfect sense
Yep.
to me.
Sherry?
Sorry, I just said that I agree with Gil. I think that makes perfect sense for the committee to evaluate the applicant, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, well, I'm going to put this vote out here then. And simply yay or nay. I'm going to say if everyone is okay with this, I'm going to ask our subcommittee to interview this individual. And based on their recommendations, to accept or reject based on the interview. And what I'm simply putting out there is, does everyone agree, yes or no? I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, any no's? 1 no. Okay. Yeas have it then. Who is the nominating committee? Or that was Tracy and Peter, correct?
And Derek, Tracy, Peter, and
think
Derek,
Derek-
Mr. Chair.
Tracy, Peter, and Derek. Okay. Is Derek going to be around is the question.
Maybe Tracy, would you like to reach out to Derek? He's around. It's just
If
No.
if
finding
he's
the right
not, I'm
timing.
okay with just the 2 of you, or find a third body somewheres. I can be a third body if need be.
I can send an email and see when we can meet. If
Okay.
we can't arrange something, then Steve, I can reach out to you and we can figure a second.
Perfect. I would say based on their recommendations, I know this individual, I do believe my gut feeling is they will be a good fit. Okay, moving on. A welcoming letter to the Easter Seal. I was very, very pleased to see the Easter Seal move an office down from Halifax to Yarmouth. That's incredible because we're the only ones I think if I read it right, we're the only second office in Atlantic Canada. Is that right, Gail? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's the only one in Atlantic Canada. I know it's the only one in Nova Scotia outside of Halifax. So it's
Wow,
unique in that
okay.
That's
a big deal, and I would
Yeah.
like to send a letter on town letterhead, welcoming them first and foremost, and then asking them to come, just as the library did tonight, and talk about what they're going to do in the Yarmouth area. To do that, I need a simple consensus from you guys to do it. I have 1 in favor, 2 in favor, 3, 4, 5. Anybody disagree? Nope. Okay, that will happen. New business. Don't all jump at once. How's everybody handling the winter so far? You know, this is the first real boat of snow we've seen, but think about it, it's the middle of January and this is the first time we're seeing snow. Okay. So if there's no new business, our next meeting, did we go through the approval of all the agendas and everything, Sherry?
Yes, we did.
Yep.
So if we wanted to do the next meeting in 2 months, that would put us March 8th at 6. I think every 2 months is what we had discussed at the last meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, because we were talking before whether or not we need to meet monthly or whether we can meet every 6 weeks or 8. I wouldn't be opposed to go till like the end of February and give Tracy and Peter time to get this new member in place, as well as time for me to meet with this individual and attempt to bring them up to date.
So if we wait until March 8th, that will keep it on the second Tuesday of the month, because I know other people had different meetings on different certain evenings of the week. So that makes sense.
What about March break? Is that going to interfere?
That's later.
That's okay.
Yeah, this will be before the break.
Mr. Chair, the citizen, so the process is for appointing a new member is the nomination committee would bring it back to the whole committee, the recommendation, and then there needs to be a motion brought to the floor to accept. And then when they come on board, then you can schedule the orientation after that, but not before.
Okay. What about the community of the whole and the town as a whole, or sorry, the town? How does that fit in here? Because I know we were appointed by the town. So do we have to make recommendation to the town?
I think it could be a statement that this is your recommendation. So it would be the February committee of the whole.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question. I wonder, and I know that other committees other organizations that I deal with, basically because of COVID, we've been forced to do some motions by email and then ratify them at meetings. So I wonder if that would be a possibility to facilitate this process.
I think it would be a good idea, especially with snow flying right now. And I'm sure it's not going to end much before the end of February. Cold weather, COVID, flus, et cetera, et cetera. I think emails, virtual meetings are the way to go right now.
And that way too, if the member is approved, if I understand correctly, then they would be able to join us on March 8th. So that would save some delay in them joining us too.
I think March 8th gives us a bigger time frame that we're going to need in this situation.
And I'm not sure how we make the decision whether it will be virtual or in person or a hybrid. We picked virtual for this one because it's January. We weren't sure about weather.
Well, can we not just hang the how for later?
We can. It's generally easier.
We'll say March 8th, but we'll hang the how for later.
Okay. And I'll send out a poll or something closer to.
Okay, anybody else? Then I'm going to say meeting is adjourned at 1 hour, 26 minutes or 27 minutes, 7:14 PM, January the 10th, 2023. Thank you guys for coming. Keep an eye on your emails for anything that